Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Music Business Empowerment Conference. This, again, is the Women in Marketing panel. We have an esteemed list of amazing women joining us today. Um, so let's just get into it. If you guys want to introduce yourselves, I'm going to do it kind of based on the grid of my screen. So Raina, you are to my left. Raina Bass from 300. You are up first.
Hi, Tiara. Hi everyone. I'm Raina Bass. I am SVP of Marketing at 300 Entertainment. So 300 artists are Megan Thee Stallion, Young Thug, Gunna, Shy Glizzy, Highly Suspect. Very diverse label.
Great. Michelle Huff Elliott.
Hi, ladies. My name is Michelle Huff Elliott, and I'm a partner at Strategic Heights Media, as well as the co-founder of the Publicists Forum. And some of our clients, we include film, television, as well as music artists, record labels, and music publishing companies based in New York City.
Nice. And Carolyn Williams.
Hi, everybody. I'm Carolyn Williams. I am EVP of Marketing at RCA Records. I oversee the entire marketing department, which includes marketing, tour marketing, and brand integration. We have a very wide range of artists underneath our marketing roster, everyone from Alicia Keys to HER to Miley Cyrus to Pink to G-Eazy. It pretty much runs the gamut. I oversee urban, pop, alternative, and dance marketing.
Nice. So thank you for that brief intro, ladies. And I guess just to intro myself as well, I'm the general manager of Alamo Records. So we have artists like Rod Wave, Little Durk, Little Got It, and a very, very extensive list of young rappers and talent. So let's get to the question portion. How did you guys get started in music? And is it something that you always saw yourselves doing?
Well, I actually have a funny story about that. I was in college and I wanted to be a lawyer at the time. And a girl who was a year ahead of me was a rapper, Entice. And she had a song at the time with Method Man. And I was just like, hey, you're in college and you have a song that's like on BT, Billboard, what's going on? So I just went to a couple shows with her. And at that point, I called my parents and said, yeah, I want to work at a record label now. Like, I don't want to be a lawyer. They were like, what? And so I ended up actually sending, at the time, we didn't have email. I'm not going to age myself. Sent letters to Monty Littman, who was actually, he was in a Billboard. I begged my librarian to purchase Billboard, which was very expensive back then. And I wrote a letter to Monty Littman and he replied and was like, the next time you come to New York, call me. And so I called him and he pretty much set me up on all these interviews. And I ended up becoming the international marketing director for Virgin Records for about 7 years. And so that's kind of like my funny story, even though I'm from Baltimore and I knew Kevin Liles. And speaking of Raina with 300, and he was like, why you never told me? I was like, cause I didn't want to use you. I wanted to get in my own way. So that's how I got into the music industry. But initially I wanted to be a lawyer.
Nice. Carolyn.
It's similar to Michelle's story. I actually kind of stumbled into marketing. I actually studied journalism and advertising in college. And I just knew I was going to be a journalist. And I did that for some freelance work as a journalist for a little while. And I actually met a producer I was doing a story on, and it turns out that he had got a production deal and he was looking for someone to help kind of like run his office. The producer, I'm going to age myself and say the producer was Pete Rock at the time. He had a deal with Elektra. And I was like fresh out of college, knew nothing about the music business, but I did have some background in like general office management for all the hundreds of temp jobs I did in college. So I actually started working for him to help him, just get his office together. And that kind of got me really, I saw the music business as interesting. I was able to work with different departments via Elektra Records. And from there, I went to an indie label called Penalty Recordings. And that's really where I got my feet wet in marketing. But I will say, I tell everyone this, like, it's really important to try everything, because at Penalty, I tried everything. I did publicity, I did promotions, I did marketing, I did a lot of different things. And in order to find what you like, you have to find out what you don't like. And I really decided that I really liked marketing. And that kind of took me from Penalty. I went to Tommy Boy Records, which was a great opportunity because I was able to work different genres of music, from gospel to dance to hip hop to R&B. And from Tommy Boy, I went to J Records, worked for Clive Davis, which was like boot camp and, how to really get your shit together. So that was actually how I got to RCA, just being within that label group for all those years. I, did marketing for Clive and just stayed with it. And here I am at RCA.
So my story is also similar to Michelle and Carolyn. But in certain ways, I did always know that I wanted to work in the music business. I used to watch like Behind the Music and Diary and Driven, and read all of the notes in the album packaging, and I'm like, this is what I want to do. But I did, take a different path. Like Michelle, I worked in an attorney's office. I worked for the district attorney when I was in college. I worked for a jewelry company for a while, but I went to college in New York because I knew that I wanted to get an internship at one of these labels. And I specifically always wanted to intern at Def Jam. And it took a while. I had to call every day. It was a long process, but I finally got the internship. And, I made connections there. And oftentimes, like what happens with interns when you graduate, there's not a job available. But I didn't just, not keep in contact with everyone. It took 2 years after I graduated to actually get the job at Def Jam. It took a lot of still showing up, networking, but I got the job in marketing at Def Jam. And when I was an intern, as well as what Carolyn said, is very important that you do a lot of different things. I interned in promotions, I interned in publicity, and then I interned in marketing. And that's how I kind of decided, okay, like this is definitely where I want to be. But my first official job was in marketing at Def Jam. I was assistant for Chris Atlas. And I was at Def Jam for 3.5 years. And one of my mentors there, she actually left the company, and she had been there for years. And I ended up leaving with her. And we went to a startup that, didn't last long. It was about 3 months. But she actually was Kevin's assistant back in the day. And 300 launched the same month that I got to that startup. And I was like, man, I should have waited. This is what being a Def Jam fan, I'm like, this is what I would always want to do, work for, Kevin and Lior. But she was able to get me an interview with them, and I started with 300. I was the first marketing hire. I've been there for 7 years, and now, I oversee the marketing department.
Thank you. A lot of you mentioned trying different things, and I think people sometimes think the road is just this completely straight trajectory, and you get picked for these jobs and it's super easy. What are some of the qualities that you guys had that got you also to where you are?
It's very interesting because I didn't realize, like you just said, it's not a straight line. It's a journey. I never would have thought, I would have been an entrepreneur. Like, I never would have thought that in my life. I thought I was going to be like the next Sylvia Rhone. I was like, I want to be the next female president of a record label. Like, that's what I'm going to do. But I just think, like Carolyn and Raina both said, just being open to other opportunities. I mean, I had an assistantship when I was in grad school with the PGA Tour. Yeah, I worked at Rough House Records. I was there when the Fuji split up with the argument. I was there. I was like, what's going on here? Like I just interned, worked part-time at all different companies. So from all of those experiences, I think it helped build up my skill set to what I do now, which is publicity, event planning and marketing. Like I never thought that I would be a publicist, never ever. But I always just had the comfort level. I was never afraid to go in a room and not know someone. Just growing up, just going back to being younger, I always, just like meeting people, but keep in touch with people. Even working in retail when you're young and a teenager and you want to work for money for clothes. I just was never scared to sell, never afraid to go into that unknown territory. So I think for me, all of those skill sets combined, being a multitasker and being able to do several things at once, being able to listen to a client, to an artist, to your peers and executives, and being able to ideate on those ideas and concepts and come up with something really dope, which is marketing. But it being able to put it out there in the world and be very outspoken and persuasive, which is the other side of me as being a publicist. So I think that all of those skill sets combined prepared me for what I do today. And I think now you have to be multifaceted. I don't think like, even if you're in marketing, I know that marketing and public relations coincide, they kind of parallel and we work very closely together. But I do think even with you, Tiara, Carolyn, and Rain, I think that we all, like, even though we're in marketing and we're PR, it's time we're a concierge, we're a therapist, like with clients and artists, we're the event planners coming up with ideas and building on our relationships with vendors. Like, can you come down on that price? We're all of those things. So I think it's more of a skill set. But I think what we all have in common too, and what makes us very successful in what we do, is the ideation and execution of those ideas and thoughts.
Completely agreed.
I agree as well. I think Michelle hit the nail on the head. I think the fact that I was able to touch upon a lot of different areas of the business helped me to become a better marketing person. I mean, you have to know, I always say you have to know everything in marketing. You have to know how radio works. You have to know how digital marketing works. You have to know how publicity works. You have to know all these things because marketing touches every facet of the business. So, it's not like you're just focused on one thing. You're focused on all these things. And if you don't know how they work and how they operate and some of the players, some of the functions, you really, you're gonna struggle in understanding every facet of marketing. And I think that actually was a benefit, that I had because I had done so many different things for different labels before I decided to go into marketing. So, and to Michelle's point, it's being multifaceted. I'm a Virgo, so I'm like detail oriented. I'm super organized. Like that's just like my nature. So having, that skill set and, multifaceted and the ability to pivot, I think is super important, especially nowadays. You have to evolve. You have to, stay on top of, things change within a week, literally, as we saw what happened with where our business is now. And I think it's really important that you have to be flexible, solution-based, and, faceted as far as, what you're willing to get involved in and touch upon. But all those things, I think, play into being a strong marketing person.
Yes, everything they said. I think the other thing too is being able to read between the lines and be able to take direction with very little information. I think, and Michelle, is something you said, the ability to listen, I think is something that even outside of marketing, if you're just going to be in this business, in general, those are important qualities to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Carolyn, I think you touched on something too with what you just said about, having to be fluid, and the music changes every few years anyway, but obviously with COVID, it's hit touring and so many other facets of just life and music as well. How have you guys been adapting with artists and plans? Because this is obviously an unprecedented time. So how are you adapting?
You want us to just go in order as we've been going, or should I?
Kick it off.
Go, girl. You could go.
I mean, again, you have to pivot. And I think, I say kudos to all the ladies on this panel, because I've seen, some of the things that you've been doing, and across the business, we pivoted fairly quickly. It was unprecedented what we saw, and especially as it related to like live music and the ability to get your artists in front of people. So I would say that was probably the biggest area where we saw a huge change or shift in how we were marketing our artists and promoting. The live stream aspect of what we do now is just, that's probably 80% of how we position our artists, as opposed to in the past, you had so many different areas. You can do a promo tour, you can get them out in the market, you can do, touring and have live shows and showcases and things like that. And I think, the fact that it's, a gift and a curse, we definitely are experiencing, losses in our business when it comes to the live touring business. At the same time, we have the ability to reach a much larger group of people, because we have so many more people who are engaged on live streams. So whereas you might have had, a smaller audience that was engaged in live streaming, now it's a lot bigger audience. I mean, you can see with something like Versus, so it's a prime example of the fact that, people want to get together. What you saw happen with D-Nice when, we first went into COVID, people just wanted to be together and party, even though it was virtual. So I think how we're presenting our artists and their music and how they're touching their audiences, that has been the biggest shift that I've seen in our business due to COVID.
Yeah, I agree. I think in the beginning, for us, we actually didn't, fortunately, lose business, but it was more just a little bit of a pivot, especially for our clients that we do actual event PR for, where we're on site. And, I'm like, my daggone flyer frequent miles went down. I mean, I'm used to flying to Los Angeles like 20 times a year. I was like, that was gone. I was just like, ah. And so it was just more so that pivot to online, I think, for our clients like ASCAP, where it's a really huge event in Los Angeles, and we do the Rhythm and Soul Awards, and we had to do it virtual. And for them, it was really trying to wrap your mind around, how is the consumer going to ingest this information? Are they even going to be interested? Do they want to sit at a computer and watch an award show, like when they usually attended in person and were able to network and see everyone? So I think for those clients of ours, and for people for award shows, I think that for artists, and performances, it was a huge shift for them. Like if you see that MTV, they went live. They had some people doing live performances. It wasn't a pre-recorded thing. But I still think that BET Awards, they did a really great job in incorporating their pre-recorded performances, but having the host be live. So it was just trying to figure that out. And then for us, trying to market and to the consumer, and then get media interested. I mean, media, they were just like all over the place, because for them, it was like information overload. Like everyone's pitching them. It was like, what are we going to write about now? So I think for us, it was more of that shit. It was the normal with a little bit of a pivot. But I think for artists, just trying to adjust performing online and making sure, instead of an actual audience, and figuring out how can they touch that consumer to make them be interested. Like, what type of performance should I do? If it's a pre-recorded performance, how can I get interest from them? Like, is the consumer still going to like it? And I think the Usher's performance was a really great example when he did Good Morning America. I mean, that was a pre-recorded performance, but I was engaged like I was in Vegas at his show. Like, I was just like, okay, Usher. Where it's been some other performances where you're just like, okay, I'm a little bored here. So I think that was an adjustment for the artist as well. But as far as the marketing PR side, it was just a little bit of a pivot for us to try to figure out what's going to keep the consumer and media engaged.
It was a bit of it was definitely a process. I think for us, like, we first went through, like, at first everything was like, oh, IG Live. And the reality is, we have some artists who just, they're not comfortable with a phone in front of their face. They're not, they're not, Megan's personality is totally different from Gunna's personality, from Thug's personality. So for me, it was like, okay, let's actually, figure out what your skill sets are that we've never had to really, really seriously consider, because for an album cycle, we have the event, we have the promo tour, we have the tour, there's ways that we can directly engage with fans. So we had to kind of go to the drawing board and see like who can do what. I think it was also more important than ever that we have campaigns that are shareable on social media. It's like, okay, what's gonna pop off? What's gonna give us 2 to 3 weeks of additional attention after this album drops? And one of the first albums that we put out during COVID was Gunna's album, Wanna, which was one of the albums I've had the most fun with so far. So I think it definitely was just like we had to really look at developing campaigns that were going to be shareable on social media and be very specific about that. So, Gunna's campaign was centered around astrology. So, we partnered with the Hood Healer and developed Wanascopes, and it was something that we were able to do weekly, and it was shared across social. I think we had like 30 million impressions. So it was something that was it was very specific due to being in COVID and developing it around that, knowing that Gunna's not able to tour and Gunna's not an artist that's going to be walking around with a phone in front of his face 24/7. So
Raina, out of curiosity, being during COVID, since he isn't that person that's on IG like a Megan, do you feel that it helped him to come out of his shell a little bit more?
You know what? Gunna's Gunna. I think that he definitely he's not really an artist that like changes due to what's going on. He's like, listen, this is me and this is gonna be me, and that's it. So I can't say that he, it made him come out of his shell more. I think he just, is like, he's sound in who he is as a person, and it's like, let's just develop campaigns that work for me. It's kind of like, it's your job to figure out how to make it travel on social media, but I'm not doing any shit that I wasn't doing, before COVID to a certain degree. So
I think it definitely, it showed that we had to be, like you said, Raina, like look at each artist, because sometimes not even that you're just checking off boxes, but you had to be super creative. And like you said, find ways that are gonna share and spread. Like I remember, posting my Leo horoscope, my Wanascope. You know what I mean? So I did that. Was such an amazing campaign. But and even to your point about the Usher performance, like everything that we're doing now has to be creatively stepped up a notch. Like it can't just kind of be the you're kind of performing in front of a green screen. Right. So the production and, like I said, the creativity is something I think that I've seen the most in COVID step up. Definitely, because that's kind of like the only thing that we have right now.
I agree. I think the fact that TV performances now are like mini music videos, especially when you look at the BET Awards, for example, those performances were literally world premiere of music videos. It's like they really stepped up their production. And I think the artists are actually liking those artists who, want to kind of like step out of the box a little bit and don't want to be confined by a stage per se, or, just whatever restrictions they have when they're going into a studio to do a TV performance. I think they are really enjoying the fact that they can be a little bit more creative and they can incorporate, more things that they may have limitations on when they're doing something on the stage or in a studio. So that's an area where, I actually would like to, see continued, even when people are able to, move around a little bit more and, we get past this situation we're in now. I think that the content should still have that high bar, and it also will make people more interested because I think Michelle or Raina made the point. It was Raina that said, the IG lives were getting a little boring after a while, in the beginning where everybody's playing an acoustic guitar and everybody's doing like the same thing. And after a while, it's like, okay, seen this already. But when you started to see those TV productions and those award shows, it was like, oh, okay, like I just saw a new music video for this song. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah, some of them have been better, honestly. I feel like you said, that first 2 weeks, I was like, if I get one more IG Live alert from
everybody trying to be a host of a show, like, no, we don't need you all to be a host of a show.
Listen, I'm very glad that part of it is over. So additionally, within everything else that's going on, 2 young Black executives launched the Press Pause campaign this summer. What unique obstacles do you think Black women in the music space experience? We'd be here all night, but.
It's a tricky one. You mean now or pre?
Overall,
I think in general, I think, sometimes, now obviously it's such a weird time. So, and like you said, we will be out of this. So in general.
I mean, I think in general, it's kind of, I wouldn't know if I would say Black women. I think women in general, obviously Black women would probably be, experience it probably a little more, but I do think as a woman across the board, I think that we have definitely, we're in a business that just by nature, statistically speaking, that there was always less women, not just in the business, but specifically in positions of power. When I was coming up, there was like maybe 3 women that, oversaw departments, it's like, and those were like the 3 women that you had to look to. Where I see now, there's a lot more. Probably not as many Black women as there should be, but I see there's a lot more women in general. And I think as a Black woman, as a Black woman who came up in hip hop, just keep it, 100% real, that was tough. My start in this business was predominantly in hip hop. And that was something that, you really had to prove yourself. And there's a fine line. You got to prove that you're not, someone that's going to sleep your way to the top. You got to prove, that you are, an intelligent, well versed in what you do. I definitely think we had to work a little bit harder across the board to prove ourselves as women who were serious about what we wanted to do and how we wanted to get there. But I think now, people are a lot more woke, I think that people are taking things a little bit, more seriously when these issues are raised. If you say to a white executive, I don't think we have enough Black women, positions of power, I think they're going to pay more attention now than they would have in the past, because I think the scrutiny is out there. But I will say, across the board, as a woman, it was definitely double standards. It was really hard to show that I, was as strong of a player as my male counterparts. And I think as a Black woman, you kind of got it double, where you had to just work harder across the board and just prove, not just within, a white community, but you had to prove within a Black community that you were worthy of your accomplishments and being given more.
For me, working in international, you can only imagine that I really saw people of color. So in my department, I was the first Black woman, period, to head that department. There were other women who led it, but I was the first woman of color, Black woman, to lead it. And so I reported directly to the co-presidents at that time. Virgin had 2 co-presidents who were both British. And so it was more about, I think, just trying to explain to them certain things about our culture, just from working in international, because, you go to London, you go to Paris, you go to Germany, Black culture is different, even though some things are similar as far as the music, but it was different, and just trying to explain to them what that was. As far as being a woman, it was times, because at that time, I would say it was only one other female executive at Virgin at the time, and the rest were men. So just being in a room with majority men and only one other woman, we had to sometimes, really make a stance and come together and say, no, this is what we're saying. But yeah, and that was 19 years ago. And so I think now it's definitely more inclusivity. I'm sure it's a longer way to go now. It's not as far as the way as it was back then. I mean, back then I rarely saw people of color in international. And now it seems like it's more women, more people of color in that department. But in the record label, I'm sure that Raina, Tierra, and Carolyn, you guys can speak more on that for now. But back then it was rare. I was trying to find, it was just like, who are these people? And then of course I would always get assigned the Black artists. I'm like, okay, I want to work on Rolling Stones too. I mean, I do know all kinds of music. That's why I'm head of international. So those are the things, the battles that I had to fight at times.
With The Show Must Be Paused, shout out to Jamila and Brianna. Jamila is one of my closest friends, and I'm really inspired by everything that they've been doing. I think for me, I've seen specifically for Black women, we're often in roles that require much more than, what the professional obligation is. And, obviously the music business is 24/7. But I think there are Black women in roles where you have to be somebody's therapist, somebody's big sis, somebody's auntie, somebody's mother, manager, stylist, all things that can be emotionally and mentally draining, as well as doing your job and marketing their music. And these are not tangible things that when it's time to talk about compensation, they're a big part of your job, and they're often at the core of the relationship with the artist that makes things move. But it's not really something that comes up when you're talking about compensation and when you're talking about raises and when you're talking about your value to the company. And it's something that's known, but it's very hard to quantify. And I realize this more, and it's something, one of the reasons why, I wanted to have urban removed from my title. And it's not, to me, it's not about, taking away my Blackness. You don't need the word urban in my title to know that I'm a Black woman. But there's other Black women on my team who I'm like, listen, if you want to Michelle's point, you're interested, you don't just only listen to hip hop, right? You listen to pop, you listen to rock, you're going to work those artists too. You're going to do whatever it is that that you're interested in, because I believe that you can market anything. Mm-hmm. And I'm able to see the difference in the dynamics of, the roles that Black women play specifically in marketing when it comes to Black artists. So I think that that's certainly an obstacle that we face when it comes down to compensation and moving forward in the business, because it's also a large part of the job that doesn't really get talked about.
I always hated the word urban. I'm like, urban is everything.
Right.
When people say that, I'm like, we touch everything. So why are you putting urban in the box? That's not just Black. Urban is everything. You go to Japan, right. Our culture's there. That's not urban. Yeah, right. But I've always hated that term.
And to Raina's point, marketing is a transferable skill set. I mean, the way I might market Alicia Keys may not be different from the way I might market Pink. The way that we market Kane Brown may not be different from the way we market Khalid. And I think it's not. We're really talking about audiences,
right?
As opposed to the skill set. I think the skill set is the same. And I think it's super important. And, before I oversaw all of marketing, when I was a VP, I was VP of urban marketing. And when I got the opportunity to become an SVP, I said the same thing. I don't want urban, in my title, because look, like you said, I leave my house in Black, I come home in Black. Right? But I felt it was important, outwardly speaking, so that they understood I want to work more projects. And now that I'm in a position to touch upon, across the whole label, whether it's pop, whether it's rock, whether it's dance, whether it's urban, like I said, I think the skill set is transferable. And I think that's what's really important for people to recognize that you can do it. You can do all genres of music if you're just smart and the basics of what goes into marketing a project, and how do you identify an audience, and you know, how do you look at analytics and realize who you're targeting. Like those are things that across the board. I don't care if you're, you know, a pop artist, a rock artist, or urban artist.
And that's the thing that's always been an issue for me. It's like if you're a Black man or a Black woman at a label or at a company, you only know Black things. Like, it's like you only can work with Black artists. You only can do marketing for them. It's like, so Are you going to white people and Asian folk and telling them that they only can do white folk and Asian folk? Like, that doesn't even matter. That doesn't even make any type of sense. You have, you know, at Def Jam, there were white executives, Asian, Latina, marketing, you know, our rap, hip hop. Like, so why do you come to us and think that that's the only thing we can market and promote and publicize? So that's always an issue. Like for us, it's like, oh God, you can do the multicultural part of the campaign. I'm like, we know all press. Why does it have to be just African-American press? Like, it just confuses me. I'm like, no, we want to do the entire thing. But yes, it happens all the time.
Yeah, that was something very early on. I was in publicity before I came to do marketing at Alamo. And my first job in publicity, my mentor told me to never let them pigeonhole you in just one genre. Like you said, Rolling Stone, they are covering everything. Like, it's not just, you know, one lane that you should be focused on. And I think, you know, we touched on the word urban. I think, Raina, you had brought it up about it being removed from your title. And we've seen a lot of labels remove it from entire departments and their titles as well. And we've created task force across, you know, multiple labels. What are some changes from this that you guys would hope to see?
I feel that urban, or even like the term or the title, you know, it's a culture. So it's music, it's fashion, it's art, you know, it's all encompassing. So I don't necessarily think that we should just ignore what urban is, because similar to hip hop, you know, urban is a culture and it's adopted by all different, you know, kinds of people. But one of the areas that I will say that I would like to see more changes in is radio. I think radio formatting is, you know, I think one of the biggest reasons why we have terms like urban, you know, or R&B or pop. I think that's an area where I'd like to see changes. When I was growing up, you know, you would hear all different kinds of music on one station. And I think, you know, when these conglomerates got created and the programming, you know, kind of changed, you started to see a lot more, I'm just going to use the word segregation in, you know, how, you know, records are being played and in what formats. So I think that's an area, you know, and no shade to radio, we need you guys. But I really would like to see, you know, some changes in how they format music, because I think that's a huge area of why we still are debating over terms like urban versus Black music versus pop music, etc.
Yeah. Would you guys like to add on?
You said it for me.
Definitely. I 100% I agree with the radio conversation. And I think also just from this, just representation. You know, there are a lot of labels that are being ran by white people that, you know, predominantly, or let's say departments or predominantly hip hop labels that are not run by Black people. I'm fortunate enough to work for a label that is ran by a Black man. And sometimes when I talk to my you know, colleague, my friends who are at other labels, I don't have those experiences, and I'm so grateful for it. But, you know, I think we have a long way to go in terms of representation in the boardroom specifically.
Yeah. Absolutely. What is something that, you know, we've talked about? I always say that when people ask me what I do, I'm like, I'm a babysitter. And, you know, looking out for the livelihood of so many people. I had an artist, he got offended one time, and I was like, that's what we're doing right now. Actually, I'm babysitting you. But, you know, and again, people think that it's like this glamorous time and you're, you know, expensing things and attending award shows, but, you know, they don't know that you can't even find your artist that's about to go on 5 minutes before.
Sweating, chasing folk behind the scene, crazy clothes, looking crazy.
Moving clothes, a flat iron hair before, you know, the multitude of things that you're doing that is not marketing, you know, it's an extensive list. What is something that you maybe wish you had known before you had got into marketing, or something that you wish someone would have told you that you know, again, you didn't expect? Because I did not expect to be flat ironing nobody's hair at all, besides my own.
I think that understanding that it's, because I think, like you just said, you form relationships with the artists, and just trying to explain to them that it's a music business first. So just that relationship between like the artist and then you doing your job. I've always kept it separate, but I think just trying to, that relationship between the artist and you being an executive, I think that if people would have kind of given me some pointers beforehand, I would have done and said things differently. But I think that was kind of one of the things that kind of shocked me. But other than that, like nothing else really shocked me. But I think that whole artist executive dynamic.
I think to add on to that, there's not anything I really regret or wish somebody had told me before I started the job. But I do think for anyone that wants to do this role, I think it's very important that you set boundaries and be very clear on how you want your artist to view you. And I would say, like, okay, if you're going to be in the club, you know, with your artist and you're as turned up as they are, and, you know, you're, the fun marketing person, is going to be, at some point, it's going to be hard to get your job done, because there's not, like, you're not, you know, setting boundaries and making them understand that this is also business. So I think it's a fine line of, like, you know, developing a relationship with the artist, but also understanding how you want them to view you, and what's going to help you at the end of the day be the best at your job. So I can't really say that, you know, there's anything that I wish I knew before, but it's definitely things that I would tell people that plan, you know, that want to do this job, to be mindful of.
Yeah, I think that line is so fine of, you know, having the rapport with them so they obviously trust you, because I think having your artist trust you, it's a huge part of it. But it's also like, I'm not your friend, you know, at the same time, like we have a friendly rapport, you know, but we're not necessarily friends. So you can establish that boundary, because like you said, if it's time to, you know, do stuff that you don't necessarily want to do, it's difficult, because then it almost seems like it's this friendship, you know, and that is something that I've seen in other places and people. And I think it can definitely get a little tricky.
I had no preconceived notions. I'll just be totally honest. Like I really, you know, expected anything when I was coming into the business. So there was nothing that I didn't think I would be doing or wouldn't be doing. I honestly had no preconceived notions, but I think Raina makes, you know, an excellent point about, you know, really, you have to make sure that you get respected. And I think, you know, you want to have a great relationship with your artists. You want them to know that you get it, you understand them. But at the same time, if you out in the club partying every night, it does get to a point, and I've seen this, I've been in this business for a long time, and I've seen it happen, you know, far more times than I can remember. That artist does start to side eye you a little bit. At a certain point, they're like, well, if you out here partying with me all the time and you getting high and we drinking, are you really getting this job done? Like, it always gets to that point, you know? So, and I also will say, you have to, I think trust is a really interesting thing, because, you know, every artist is different, but you have to establish the trust with it. They know that you're not going to be a yes person. They have to know that you may be that person that's going to tell them what no one else is going to tell them, but it's the truth, you know. And I had one artist, I'll never forget. We were on a video shoot and everybody was like, oh my God, you look dope. You look so good. And I was like, you look crazy. You have to change, like that don't look right. You know what I mean? And it was like, but they respected me for saying that because it was like they would have got on camera and been looking crazy. And I feel like, so you have to know that, and again, it's a fine line. You have to make sure that you have a certain rapport with that artist, and they do trust you to believe you when you say you look crazy. But you also don't want to be that person that just, tells them, everything they want to hear and never challenges them, because then they'll never grow either, So I think it's a fine line, but the trust thing is something that I feel very strongly about. And I think more and more artists will respect you for being honest and upfront with them and for just really doing your job.
Yeah.
That speaks louder than everything. Delivering on what you are there to do speaks louder than anything else.
Yep.
Absolutely. This is still kind of, one of my favorites, Kanye West, was old Kanye, of course. He went on a huge Twitter rant about his publishing and labels. And I think a lot of times the conversation about, is a label necessary for artists? It comes up a lot. We all work there, so obviously it is. But what are your thoughts on artists and signing?
Well, since I'm not in the label, I used to be in
the label.
You
can be unbiased.
I could talk on the outside. As a publicist, oy vey. That's all I got to say about him. I'm so happy I'm not his publicist. Okay, yeah. So that's one thing. The second thing, I think that honestly, Master P taught us this whole structure and gave us this blueprint years and years and years ago. I think that there are benefits for both sides. I think that if you're able, obviously, if you're going the independent route, you have to really, really get your hustle on, because you're the marketing team, your finance, your artist development, like you're doing it all. Your radio promo, like you really have to get out there. Because, back in the day, artists used to go like on tours, on buses. It's a very different time now. Then now you have the internet where you can try to post a song on social media and get people's immediate reaction to it. It's different from back then. So I think that artists now have to have that same hustle mentality, as if they're working in their own label. Like that's just the thing. But I think the advantage to having a record label, a major label behind you, is having all those departments and having all of that support to help you. But I think they're both beneficial. And then I think that they both have their challenges as well. But I think how many people, if you really think about it, how many people get signed to major labels outside the people that submit or try to get signed? It's a very small percentage of those people. So if you feel that you've been going out and trying to get a major deal and you can't, act like your own independent label and hustle yourself and get a manager who has relationships with radio within your local city and get your grind on. That's how I feel. I just feel like be your own label within yourself until you get that major label behind you. And we obviously know that there's so many different ways you can structure your deal. Like you can have your independent label, but have major distribution. Like it's so many different formulas that you can use. But I think that I think major labels are great. I think indie labels are great. It just really depends who your team is behind you, the hustle that you have as an artist creatively and business-wise. And so I just think it really depends on you as an artist and you as a business person as far as which road you should take. But I see benefits for both.
I agree. I mean, I think the thing is, like, the key is, like, independent doesn't mean alone. And you need a team regardless of if this is what you really want to do, and you're trying to operate at a certain level, you need a team. And, whether you decide that team is just people that you grew up with, or people that are from your hometown, or, you decide to partner with a label, the reality is you need a team to be successful. So I think, it's really whatever is the best fit for you. I think that there is going to be, I think that things are going to change in the music business in terms of, you know, the types of deals that artists are doing. I think we're going to see a lot more independence, even with, you know, I think we're going to see a lot more partnerships, true partnerships within the music business. So, you know, we at 300, it's like most of our artists are our partners. You know, all of our artists are our partners. And it's not really the, you know, traditional like, hey, you know, this label, you come in, we're telling you what to do, we're telling you how to, you know, like this is what you need to fix. And, you know, we really come to the table and try to be true service people to our artists and true partners. So again, it's really what is the best fit for you. But I do think as a whole, the industry is going to start to shift.
I think developing artists, I think the labels are much more, I think, beneficial to them as developing artists, because they're going to get a lot of resources that they may not have as a developing artist that you know, may be new to the business, may have a real talent, maybe building an audience. But I think being able to tap into the resources of a label to help build their brand, I think is hugely beneficial. Now, once you become more established and you're, you know, a bigger artist, to Raina's point, then it becomes a partnership, and those deals are structured that way. So I think there's a clear lane for developing artists, building your brand, coming into a label, using those resources to help build your brand, and then more established artists having partnerships with the labels that are where it's mutually beneficial for both of them. But I think, you know, just there are clearly different lanes and different benefits to both scenarios.
And can we just elaborate on team? Just making sure when you select members of your team, they actually have the experience in that area, and not just saying, because I've run into so many people, they have managers and they have really no experience managing an artist. Like, it's very different, of course, if you want to become a manager, you have to manage someone to get your experience. Like I completely understand that, but you can't think, okay, I'm an international artist and I'm trying to come to the States, and your manager has no experience or relationships. You know, you can't say you have a marketing person that's like your product manager, but you have no ideas and thoughts and know how to do a marketing plan. I mean, like, make sure that your team members have experience in that area. That's very important.
I think Raina said it earlier. So much of our job, you know, it includes that. Like, we're managers too. You know, we're often, you know, teaching the managers how to manage. You know, there's a lot, you know, that is entailed in what we do. You're a manager, you're a stylist, you're artist development, you're a production designer. Like, you know, like, it's so many things that you realize you have to. You're a therapist. You know, so many things you realize you have to do to help, you know, this artist and build their brand. But I do find that we are managing the managers a lot of times when it's, you know, a new manager who, you know, may just be starting out with a
when you said that about having people on your team, and I'm like, whew, I wish. And look, and I'm like, Rita, we share some. So I'm like, whew.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's like 50% of it some days. I'm like,
girl, I'm like, really?
Right, literally, really.
Trying to tell you how to do your job. You want to be the publicist? Okay.
When people, especially with publicity, people love to just say like, well, I want to be on TV. Like,
I want to be in Vanity Fair. First of all, you're not even fashionable. Let's start there. Let's be realistic here. Let us do our jobs. Okay.
I know all about it. All too well. And I think just to add on to that point of that last question, you also still have to work. Just because you're signed, I think some artists think that they don't have to do anything else and that the team completely has it, which we do, but you still have to have that same tenacity as, you know, before, as when you were trying to get signed. Because there's, you know, people are being signed every day. So you don't want someone else. And I always say, like, I don't want to outwork whoever it is that I'm working with. Like, we have to work. And to Raina's point, like, it's a partnership. So we have to work equally as hard, but I shouldn't outwork you. So definitely, again, all of it is a balance. And so wrapping up, I think the number one question, I'm sure everybody, you know, gets DMs and emails, and I see it in the chat, and every up and coming artist wants to know, like, what do you look for in an artist, and how do you get signed? Now, again, that question is obviously so broad, but I think, what are some things that you would look for, if you're signing a client for PR, or obviously at a label?
I have a rule as a marketing person. Someone said this to me a long time ago, and I think it's super funny, but it's kind of true. Like, I don't catch them, I just fry them. And I feel like
I love that. I'm stealing that.
I'm not an A&R. I like good music. I know what I gravitate towards. I know when I can recognize someone that has a lot of potential. But I know my lane. And you give it to me and you let me, and I'll do what I can. But I think much respect to the A&Rs out there, because it's a hard job. And nowadays there's everything that you take into consideration, whether it's analytics and what somebody's doing prior to getting signed, and are they streaming, what are their audience. Our A&R itself has become very analytical, as opposed in the past where you just would go to some clubs and see an artist perform and see how the crowd's reacting, or you hear a demo. Like, those days are almost gone. Nowadays it's like, what have you done before you got signed? So, I'll just be really honest with people and say that I just, I take what they give me and then the magic happens. I don't, I can't really say that I do A&R.
Yeah. I would say too, like, the biggest thing once the artists are signed, I mean, if this is more so for artists who are trying to get signed, I would say that you do need to have a vision. Whatever the story is that you're trying to tell, you need to know what it is. And you need to be able to articulate that to a team who you're going to make your story bigger. But it almost never works when we are creating it for the artist. It's very hard and it's not sustainable. So I think that the biggest thing that you have to have is a vision for yourself. And obviously, it boils down to the music as well, being, connecting with your audience. But to me, that's one of the most important things for an artist. And that actually can make me pay attention to them before they're even signed. When I go to their Instagram and there's like a clear aesthetic, and there's like, there's different verticals that they're into, and there's, just substance, right? So that's definitely something that I look for. And I'm so sorry. I am late for a flight. So I have to jump off right now, but thank you, Carolyn, Tiara, Michelle, and I hope everyone that's been listening found this informative.
Thank you. Have a safe flight.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add really quickly, I think for us, as far as from having a public relations company, I think that you have to be, and just kind of piggybacking off of what Raina just said, you have to be, because everyone thinks like, okay, I'm an artist, I need a publicist now. And I think in that sense of it, like, everyone doesn't need a publicist all the time. I think, and it's obviously at certain points in your career. So I think for us, when people come to us as up and coming artists, I mean, I love working with up and coming artists, especially if we believe in you, that you have great music. And like Raina said, you have a vision. We can go on your socials, your social platforms, and we see that it's like, wow, this person's into fashion, or this person's into beauty, or they have other things to talk about. I think that we look into that as well. And have you made a buzz? Like, if you live in Memphis, have you made a buzz in Memphis? Do people in Memphis know who you are? When you perform, do you have experience performing? I think for us, it's about that story and that narrative. And that's what we look for in an artist if we're thinking about working with them on the publicity side of things.
I do want to say that I think authenticity is really important. Again, to touch upon what Raina and Michelle are saying, we don't, if people, the fans can smell something that's fake. So I do think that it's really important that once an artist is signed, and when marketing does get involved, when we start to make the assessments of what we have, what we're working with, and that narrative that's hopefully there already, I think it's really important for the artist to have something that's extremely authentic to them and whatever, and build upon that. You know, I don't think we should change artists. You know, if you sign them, you sign them for a reason. So you really should build upon, you know, what that special thing was that you signed them for, and just, you know, kind of help to amplify that. But authenticity, I find, is the you know, one of the most important things you can bring to the table, not just for us as a label, but for your fans. The fans really, really are going to dial into when an artist is being true to themselves and real versus, you know, made up and have a fake story.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's literally what I was going to say. I think the authenticity and having a vision is so important. So many times, and like you said, Michelle, I've worked with up and coming artists, and there's just no story, and there's really nothing going on, but you think you need PR, and it's like, no, like you said, have you broken in whatever city or state that you're from? And then having that align with another vision, or not even another, having that align with a vision, it's so crucial. And even small things, like Raina said, every time we are about to sign a new artist, I go to the Instagram page. And if you have, you know, just like 3 photos and it's not engaging, like that's difficult for me then to also market, because I can't even tell what it is that you do or that you like. So even something as small as that is how your Instagram looks and what else you're into, and showing different facets and verticals, also outside of the music, is just as equally important. So I think we have reached the Q&A part. Now y'all have to let me know, am I taking people off mute, or are we just answering Q&As from the from this Q&A little box?
You're simply answering Q&As from the box.
Got it. Okay.
Thanks, VOG.
I think we answered some of these. If anyone has any questions, a lot of these I think we touched on, kind of like, is COVID-19 affecting labels signing artists? You know, and again, I think we touched on that. I know, you know, you ladies are obviously both in marketing and PR, and we're not necessarily A&Rs, but I mean, I think the answer is yes. Like, the music business is not stopped. But I think that also goes into everything that we're just talking about. How are you standing outside of everyone else? Because right now, I think also everybody's home. So, you know, you're still listening to music submissions, like it hasn't stopped. But you just have to, you know, basically stand out. But labels still are definitely signing people.
And I also think it's how, you know, when we are signing artists, and our A&Rs obviously are still, you know, God bless them, they're out there traveling, they're doing what they need to do to you know, get these artists signed. And I do think a part of the pitch process has changed, because we're now doing Zoom meetings with the full-on team, and we're meeting potential artists, you know, via that. And sometimes it's somewhat impersonal. I think you have to be really creative in how to make that engaging and make yourself stand out as a label, you know, not as an artist, but, you know, how you don't get the same vibe that you get if you're going to be in the room with people. You're learning who your team is, or who your potential team is. So I do think the Zoom pitch meetings have changed the game a little bit. And I think we have to just be really, you know, engaged and creative with how we show how we stand out as a label, and how we work together, and what kind of team we are. That's been a big change in I think the bigger part of the signing process.
And I think that that's an interesting perspective, because like we were just talking about earlier with Raina and Gunna, like, if you don't have that person that, like, a lot of artists are introverts. So if you're doing a Zoom pitch meeting, it's kind of like, and like you said, and you want to be your authentic self, it's how do you let them know that, like, everyone's not going to be rah-rah and energetic, but still, how are you engaging and really being persuasive about who you are as an artist via Zoom? Like, I think that that's difficult if you're not a Megan Thee Stallion or a Cardi B, or someone that's very comfortable being on a video and telling you who they are with their voice or you know, mannerisms. If you're kind of more of a quiet person, how does that come off? I think that's very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, and honestly, that's always my number one question is like, also what else, you know, what you were just saying, what else are you into? And having an answer, especially on a Zoom call is so crucial. You know, I've been on so many calls where you just kind of, you know, there's no vibe, there's no energy because everything is virtual and it's like dead air. And so having that, going back to what we were speaking about with a vision, like it's so important, especially now, because like you said, a lot of artists are introverted. And, you know, I think we're signing like younger, at least, you know, for my label in particular, like we're signing younger and younger. So, you know, while I also understand you don't have like your full life plan out of what you want to do, just being able to show up and have answers and be authentic is super crucial on these virtual calls. Let's see, for marketing, do you have any creative ideas you can share that you have been a part of? Maybe creative rollouts and how you cater to a certain artist. You know, I think obviously Raina answered that with the Gunna project, but I think it can also speak for PR and different campaigns that you may have done as well.
I think we have to go back to the days. I mean, you know, I'm 47 and I've seen the record industry, music industry change so much, and I'm appreciative of that, honestly. But Carolyn, you remember back in the day, street teams? Terry, do you remember street teams at record labels?
I was on a street team. I was on I started out on a Bad Boy street team.
To that street team concept. When we were working, I don't know if you guys remember when Craig Mack came out and they put his CD in a Big Mac box. And that was the promo. I thought that was the most creative thing. I'm like, Craig Mack in a Big Mac box. Like, I think we need to get back to that creativity where we're sending out packages, like, and not just via email. Like people like to get things in the mail now because a lot of people are working out of office. But then of course, I know some people feel uncomfortable getting things sent to their home, but just getting a PO box. But I think for artists to be very creative and think outside the box, like how I said before in college, how I got the meeting with Monty Littman, who's still my mentor to this day, who's the president of Universal Music Group. Like being creative, how are you standing out? And I think it comes with those going back to street promo days where you come up with these creative concepts and promotional pieces. I think that's really important.
I mean, I agree. I think it's a balance. Obviously, and we're in a very different time and place now, but I do think there's this virtual street team that you can kind of, you know, dig into as well. I think there's a lot of ways that you can be creative and kind of do things that people receive a little differently, where it's like, oh, wow, you know, what was that? Via, you know, digital creative marketing. I think that's a big part of, you know, when I say we have to evolve. And at the same time, I think street marketing is almost like new and creative marketing because, you know, we did it so long ago and it hasn't been done. And now you're doing it, you know, it's like, oh, wow. Like, you know, we did a mailer one time, you know, in COVID. And it was like, that was like the hottest thing ever. Like, oh my God, they mailed something out. But that's what you have to do now. So I think it's a combination, but I think the key area that you touched upon was you have to be creative and think outside of the box. And you also have to know what your strengths are and really, you know, play up to those strengths. I think assessing your audience or even who your targeted audience is, and then looking at what they do and what they like and what kind of affinities that they have, I think tapping into that will help you come up with some really creative campaigns that might help you stand out to reach that particular audience.
Yeah, agreed. How are some ways you can get creative with marketing ideas, rollouts with smaller budgets?
We do that every day. Again, it's you know, creativity doesn't cost a lot of money. You know, it's like great ideas are infinite. I think that you just really have to think about you know, what your goal is, what your end result is. And, you know, we've seen videos that cost $5,000 that were incredible, that were like, because it was just something that was so different. And, you know, remember when Pharrell did that 24-hour, you know, video with, you know, everyone just kind of got in front of a camera and did something, you know, like those things don't cost a lot of money, but it was like, it was the biggest viral moment we had at that time. So I think that, you know, you have to just think about what your goal is, what you're trying to accomplish, and it can be done on a small budget. You know, you just have to think about what makes it different. You know, and I don't think that everything requires a big price tag to be creative. You know, I mean, we've done a lot of things, you know, where honestly, because of the talent of the artist or something unique that they were bringing to the table, really didn't cost that much. So I think that was another reason why we were able to do a lot with so little. I see we have a timer, so I'm going to wrap it up.
Answer one more question. What is, I think, you know, kind of piggybacking off that last question and finding creative ways, what is important when you need more fans, music videos or more songs digitally, or should one do both at the same time?
I'm going to say overall content is key. Yep. And it's a combination of both. It may not even be music videos. It could be content that you're creating on your own. I think a steady flow of content and your constant engagement with your fans is most important. So whether it's a new track you're dropping, whether it's something exclusive, you know, whether it's a video, a full-scale video, or just a visual that you put out there, or even something you are going to do via IG Live. I think all those things play into content, and overall content is key. Keep that conversation going with your fans.
Yes, we should be able to go to your social and see you performing, see you engaged, see some type of content, see something. Like when people say they're artists and you go to their page and it's 3 photos of them just, you know, doing selfies. We want to see you perform. We want to see that content. And like Caroline just said, engagement with your fans. That's really important.
Absolutely. And you know, some of the other questions are kind of similar. I think those answers go into, one of the questions is kind of, you know, like how, it is how do you get more fans, but, you know, how do you stand out? You just really have to be creative, and it doesn't have to be on a big budget. Like the things we're talking about literally cost no money, of being on IG Live and making sure, and not only making sure you have content, making sure you have a consistent flow of content. So if it's something, you know, and you haven't posted in 2 weeks, but you're an artist, I can't really also see that. So just making sure you have consistent content, even in your stories, like it's so key to, you know, also just the algorithm of finding things. And then there's typically a direct correlation with that, and you'll build your base even more.
I just wanted to simplify the content conversation. It's also about conversation. So you may not, if you're someone who doesn't know, you know, if you have enough flow of content, you have to keep your conversation going with your fans. I think that's also important. If you're not sure about, you know, how much content you have or what kind of content you should be doing, you should be having a conversation with your fans, a two-way conversation. I think that's super important as well.
Yep, I agree.
Absolutely.
Do it, artists. Do it. I said, get out there, artists, and do it.
Get to it. So we don't want to go over, we have a minute or 2 minutes left. I just want to say, ladies, thank you so much again for being a part of this panel. To the attendees, I hope this was helpful and you guys learned something. And everybody, you know, be safe.
Thank you for having us. It was a great panel. I'm extremely impressed with my panelists and you, Tiara. This is a great overall conference. So thank you for having me.
Yes, thanks for having me as well. It was great seeing you ladies. This is the first time I'm seeing you guys during COVID.
No,
right.
As my client likes to say, the COVID.
The COVID. All right, ladies. Well, thank you again.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. Bye.
Bye.